Davis steps under center. Gibson and McClendon behind him. Davis with motion by Richard. Will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh, he doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Left side of the line. Hood standing to Williams' right. Williams going to throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio is at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me? Connor Barth for the possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Connor Barth. Good gosh, dirty.
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. Hey guys, and welcome in to this edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's Anthony Pagnotta with you guys as always, and today we have one of the guys that covers the Tar Heels about as in-depth as anybody around the program, and it is Lee Pace from the Tar Heel Sports Network who is with us. And first of all, Lee, how you been doing, man? I know it's definitely been a crazy year around Tar Heel football, just a crazy year in general, 2020 was. So you've been hanging in there during these difficult times?
Yeah, Anthony, it certainly was a different year. Instead of doing the sideline, the ACC and its member institutions mandated that there not be any radio sideline reporters, so I was not able to do that. But since Brian Simmons, the normal analyst, lives in Orlando and couldn't travel, I moved into his slot and tried to do the best I could as the analyst, and fortunately was able to get back on the field for the Orange Bowl in Miami. But I hope that things will be back to normal next year, because it was certainly an odd season for everybody involved.
I mean, look, you've been covering the Tar Heels for over 30 years, you know, especially after what we saw last season in Kenan Stadium, where the Tar Heels were one of just 7 teams throughout the entire country to sell out. How much different was this season just from an environment standpoint inside of Kenan Stadium, especially that first game against Syracuse when you walked in there and the only people that were in there were you guys, the players, and a couple of cardboard cutouts?
Yeah, it reminded you of the of August scrimmages, preseason scrimmages when the players would be pretty much dressed out and they would go through pregame warm-ups and just sort of these mock scrimmages, and that's what it looked and felt like. But I will say, even though there was no noise, there was no crowd, there was no energy, once the opening kickoff happened, I mean, it was just football, and it was still the same game of blocking and tackling, and it was a lot of fun to watch. So that part of it wasn't that different. It was just a noise and emotion that was so different throughout the year, both home and away.
Well, what was the most exciting part for you about being able to be up in the booth alongside of Jones Angell? Because, I mean, you're a guy that's been on the sidelines. You always, get your 2 cents in during the game. But that must have been a little bit different being up in the booth, seeing everything from that standpoint and being right alongside one of your colleagues that you've been working with for a while now.
Well, 2 things, Anthony. I realized I really like being on the sideline, even though it's not a great view because you're so close, so you can't see things develop like you can upstairs. You're really close, and you get you keep your finger on the pulse of the team and the emotions of the game. But the thing that really stood out to me was just how professional and consummate Jones Angell is, just in keeping up with all the details of the game. And between he and Jody Zordner, who is the network statistician, I mean, they just had some unbelievable performances, just keeping up with all the numbers, from Sam Howell and Javonte Williams and Michael Carter and all these guys. They were peeling back the record book every single game just coming up with new standards that these guys had eclipsed. So that was fun just to kind of get a bird's eye view of all the numbers they had to keep up with and everything that goes into keeping up with all the stats, the records, and the evolution of the game.
Well, they had a lot of numbers to keep up with because this offense was about as efficient as any that we've ever seen. And, of course, it's head man by Sam Howell. At this point, I mean, look, he had a tremendous freshman season that had him ranking up there with Trevor Lawrence and Jameis Winston in the conference. Stuck with that, for his sophomore season as well. And, already has tied Darian Durant for the most touchdown passes in a career in Carolina history. At this point, is there any doubt in your mind that we're watching the best quarterback that's come through Chapel Hill?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's nobody been quite as close to Sam, just in terms of everything that he does. And this year it was fun to watch him be able to run the ball and show what he can do with his feet. And that was fun. The hit that he laid on an NC State would-be tackler in that game. He's a pretty powerful dude and quicker than you would think he was. And so his game just continues to evolve, and look forward to one more year with Sam. And last year he did it with a very young offensive line. This year it was a much improved offensive line. And next year you'll be able to say that he's absolutely with a veteran, experienced, cohesive offensive line, more so than we've talked about at any point in Sam's career.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a really big thing for him out of the gate, especially with the fact that he is going to be losing some big-time targets, including two guys in the backfield, both Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, of course, moving on, and will probably be drafted sometime on day 2 during the NFL draft. And both guys really had tremendous seasons for the Tar Heels. If you go back, Lee, and look through the history of Carolina football, they have had some tremendous running back tandems, but this one definitely has to rank up there. When you look at it, where do you think this one ranks among some of the best that we've seen in program history?
Well, it's right up there at the top. I think what's remarkable about it is that they did it with an offense that was still lethal through the air. I mean, these other offenses that have been so good that may have had an Amos Lawrence and a Kelvin Bryant tandem, or a Mike Voigt and James Betterson together, those were still ground-oriented offenses. But they accomplished this by being really powerful and explosive through the air. And it was fun to see the way the offense has evolved the last 2 years, and particularly this year, the way they made use of Carter and Williams as receiving threats. Both of them have good hands. Both of them were nimble out of the backfield. And so that added just yet another element to what Carolina was doing offensively.
Well, you talked about how the passing game was still extremely efficient. I mean, look, Sam Howell threw for over 3,500 yards. His big-time receiver, Dyami Brown, back-to-back seasons with 1,000 yards receiving, which is shocking to me that he's the first 1,000-yard, first receiver in program history to be a back-to-back 1,000-yard receiver. I think the big question that a lot of people have right now is just how tough do you think it's going to be to replace what Dyami Brown has brought to this team over the last couple of years?
Well, Dyami has just done tremendous things for the Tar Heels, but honestly, I don't think receiver is going to be as big an issue as the tailback position. Mm-hmm. Carolina still has Bo Corrales, and God, he's made some monster catches over his career, and some other guys stepped in, played very well this year. So it's the running back that concerns me the most. Where's the new guy going to come from? They've got 4 or 5 kids that are laying a claim to those snaps and those carries, and we're just going to have to see that evolve over spring and in August and going into the 2021 season.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, that they are losing a lot in the backfield. There is some production that they are losing at wide receiver, though, outside of Dyami Brown. They are also losing Daz Newsome, but as we saw with Josh Downs, there's reasons to be confident. But Daz Newsome is still a guy that had a tremendous career at Carolina, ranks top 5 in most of the major receiving categories. But You know what, Lee? It just seems a little bit different when we talk about him as opposed to some of the other big-name wide receivers that we've talked about, with Quinshaw Davis in recent years, Ryan Switzer. Those guys seem to get a little more publicity when it came to them getting, as highly ranked as they did on some of these record books. When you look at Daz, you just don't get that same feeling. Why do you think that he has kind of flown under the radar with how successful his career was?
Well, I don't think he flew under the radar as a junior. I think he had a great year there. I think he was certainly under the radar this year some. But as I mentioned earlier, those tailbacks were lethal receiving threats out of the backfield, and Phil Longo make a concerted effort to get that to them, and thus that cut back on some of Daz's touches. So I think we're going to see Daz do well in the NFL and do well in the draft, and he's going to be borne out as having had an outstanding career at Carolina.
Well, look at this Tar Heel defense. You go over to the other side, and this is a group that has shown a lot of promise throughout, Jay Bateman's time here, but especially towards the end of this season when you started seeing, some of the young guys sprinkled in and definitely started seeing more rotation of the guys up front. Do you think that that's something that we'll see more of at the beginning of the season next year in 2021 with the rotation, or do you think they try to go back to what we saw from them early this year and primarily last year when they had Aaron Crawford and Jason Strowbridge running as their main two guys up front?
Well, they'll rotate if they've got the players they think are good enough to be rotated. They're not going to rotate just for the sake of rotating. And the kids that they started rotating in toward the end of 2016 were all freshmen who were simply not ready to play right out of the gate in September. It's hard to put a freshman out that early, a true freshman. And so as the year evolved, you started to see Des Evans get more snaps, Kamen Rucker get more snaps, and then of course Jaquarius Conley and Tony Grimes toward the end of the year were both starters. So with the recruiting year that they've had with some players, the defensive tackle Kendrick Bingley-Jones, who did not play at all, who was an outstanding physical specimen, he'll be lining up in August. So it's all about talent and how good are your players and how many you have stockpiled. And there's no question that what Mack Brown inherited when he got to Carolina in 2019, he had a full complement of solid players on offense. They just lacked a quarterback. They had to go out and get Sam Howell. Defense has been the problem. Defense was never recruited very well under Larry Fedora, and they had three different coordinators, three different regimes over his 7 years. And so it's defense that has needed the attention and the stabilization, and they are doing that with their staff, and they're doing that with recruiting. And they've had three outstanding, two full Mack Brown recruiting years, and then the transition year in which they got players like Eugene Asante and Don Chapman who have already had an impact. So as they continue to recruit well and develop these players on defense, you're going to start to see a defense evolve that can keep up with the Tar Heel offense.
Yeah, the outlook looks about as good as it has in a long, long time, probably since the Butch Davis days for this defense. There are some people that think that this unit over the next couple of years has a chance to become one of the top units in the ACC, especially with the way that they've been recruiting. What do you think the next step is for this team defensively, though, as we head towards 2021? What are maybe the areas you think that they might have a chance to improve in next year?
Well, they've certainly got to get off the field in some key situations. They've got to handle running quarterbacks better than they have, which they will do as they get more athletic and get more experience. But the next step for this defense is not to lose at Virginia and lose at Florida State and give up the kind of numbers they did to some terrific quarterbacks in those games. And that's an evolutionary process, and they're getting there. They started to get better as the year went on.
So 5 seniors are scheduled to return to this team next year. Grayson Atkins, Bo Corrales, Timon Fox, Tyrone Hopper, and Garrett Walston have all announced that they will return for 2021. When you look at that group, which one of those guys do you think could have the biggest impact next season in for most of them, their 6th and final year?
Well, you ran those names by me kind of quick, but Garrett Walston certainly played more and more as the year went on. He became a reliable receiver. It's Beau Corral, as I mentioned earlier, he's just made some monster catches over his career. Those 50-50 balls that are hung up in the air, he can go up and fight and grab those with the best of them. It's good to see Kamon Fox come back, give Carolina more experience on and elite talent on the edge. So all those guys, I think, could have terrific years.
And then the last question that we'll ask you before we get you out of here, look, this team, it is going to be, there are some areas that they have to replace offensively. This is going to be an offense that maybe early on in the year isn't going to look quite as efficient as the one that we saw this year with everything that they're losing. But naturally, there are some people around the country that think that this team might take a step back. But, from your perspective, I feel like most people's expectations, especially looking at the schedule and looking at all that this team is bringing back up front on offense and on the defensive side of the ball, which they think will take a step forward, they're still thinking that this could be a team that could get back to the Orange Bowl. Do you look at that as a realistic expectation as we sit here right now with the way that everything looks around the ACC heading into next year for Carolina?
I think anybody who thinks they're going to take a step back next year doesn't know the team and isn't studying it very well, because just so much talent returning at quarterback, and that offensive line, as I mentioned earlier, they still got plenty of outstanding receivers, and they'll find somebody at running back. And if they don't, then they still got the aerial attack, which they leaned on in 2019. And the defense is only going to get better. The kicking game is only going to get more solid. They've had 1 year under Javon DeWitt as the defensive coordinator, or the special teams coordinator. Grayson Atkins is back. Ben Kiernan is back. So everything looks great in the special teams and on defense. And offense, as I mentioned, the only question mark are those running backs. And I think in time they'll solve that as well. Not as good as Carter and Williams together. I mean, we may never see that again, but certainly competent, and they'll find a way to work around it.
Yeah, it is going to be hard to duplicate just how successful that offense was. But, I totally agree with you. I think that a lot of the people that are really, talking about that, most of them are ACC talking heads, and I believe that most of them are really more just hoping that's what happens to allow maybe some of these other schools to take a step forward. It seems like Carolina is doing everything that they need to do, though, to be able to avoid that. Hey, Lee, you're one of the best. You've been covering the Tar Heels for over 30 years now. It's always great having you on, man. It was definitely an unorthodox season. Hopefully next year there will at least be some fans back in Kenan Stadium. It'll get back to being more of a regular environment. And we're hoping for you, of course, that you get to get back down on the sidelines, be a little more in touch with everything the way you like to be. So for now, take care. Thanks for stopping by with us, though. And we look forward to another fantastic year in 2021 for this Tar Heel football team. Another one that should be extremely exciting under head coach Mack Brown.
Good deal, Anthony. Thanks for having me on, and I'll look forward to the return trip. All right, so that is Lee Pace of the Tar Heel Sports Network. You guys know him. Again, he's just about as good as it gets when it comes to covering Tar Heel football. He's been doing it for so long. Football in a Forest was an amazing book. If you guys haven't gotten that, make sure you get that. Football in a Forest 2 is also coming out on the horizon here soon. And I mean, this Carolina team, the outlook is as good as it's been in a long time. So again, we are getting ready to wrap up the season. We told you that on the last edition of the podcast. The next edition that we do of the podcast will be our award ceremony for the 2020 season. So we will look back. We will hand out all sorts of awards. Make sure that you go check out our Facebook page. There's a link on the page right now where you guys can go and submit your ballot, and you can vote on all of the different awards, answer some other key questions that we've got on there for you guys as well. Some of the questions that we just asked Lee are on there, so you guys can go through, give your answers to those questions. And it is an exciting offseason. There's a lot that has to be decided for Carolina. As Lee mentioned,
mentioned, there are some guys on the offensive side of the ball that are going to be gone, but there is a lot of talent. So there should be some really interesting battles, and it's only the beginning, but we'll have you covered all the way throughout. HeelToughBlog.com is where you guys can go check that out. Of course, you can go back, check out all the stuff from the Orange Bowl game, as well as our final grades for the 2020 season, where we grade each position group. We tell you who we think had the most success, who we think can see some improvement as we go into 2021 and the offseason as well. So make sure that you guys check that out on the website. And then when it comes to the podcast, there's multiple different ways that you can go about it. So if you're one of the ones that are watching, make sure that you like and follow the Facebook page so that you'll get updated whenever we're posting a new video. When you do that in your notifications, it'll tell you that we are premiering a video. You guys can lock in and watch whenever we premiere them. We usually try to premiere them sometime around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes it'll go towards 9 o'clock at night, but most of the time we try to get them out to you earlier in the evening so that you guys can settle in right before you get ready to go to bed and listen to an edition of the podcast. As for the podcast platform, if you're a podcast listener, it'll be on Spreaker is the main spot that we upload it, but it'll be on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for us. Rating and reviewing helps us move up some of those rankings, and subscribing is for you so that you can get all of the editions of the podcast right in your podcast library. So this is only the beginning, guys. We are going to have so many more guests on here to wrap up this 2020 season. It's been kind of hectic with everything that's been going on in 2020, but we're going to try to start getting a lot more guests on here than we had during the season, and really focus on trying to break down this season and get ready for the 2021 season. So make sure that you're locked in. But once again, want to thank Lee Pace for stopping by with us. Want to thank you guys for listening, and as always, go Tar Heels!